It's episode 31. I'm going to start yelling out all the numbers of the episode now if we just did the 30th one. It's Morgan. It's me. It's My Body, My Jokes. Welcome. Please support the pod. Please throw me a like, anything. Support my Substack. I have all the things. This is a very messy intro for this episode. Today I'm going to be talking about something I think that I haven't really talked about on the podcast yet, but that has been like referred to a lot. And that is kind of like the story of like what I'm doing right now and like where I'm at, because obviously a lot of people know me as a stand-up comedian. They know me as, Morgan Gallo comedy. That's who I was before I started the podcast. So today I kind of wanted to like give you like a synopsis of like what happened, where I've come from, and like where I am now. And I promise it's interesting. I promise it's something that you will find interesting, because the last year has truly been one of the most wild years, not only because of my like recovery, but just because of everything that's happened with like my comedy career, my journey, all of that shit. So from the very beginning of kind of like where this all started, I started doing comedy in 2020 when I lived in Florida. It was the pandemic. I was sent home. I worked at a college. I was working from home. And one of my friends said to me randomly, "You're funny. You should do stand-up." I was like, okay, I have nothing better to do. I signed up for a class. I took a class in stand-up, and then I just never stopped. And I just went to open mics, and I spent, 3 years traveling around Florida, getting any gig I could, writing every single day, obsessing over podcasts and books and interviews. And I would go to comedy shows that I wasn't booked on just to like listen to comedy and write down notes. Like I was obsessed. And I have ADHD. I didn't know that at the time. I have ADHD. And so it makes sense that I was like really hyper fixating on comedy. I'm also a perfectionist. Woohoo. So I was like really integrating myself into the comedy scene in Florida. It was really intense. I got pretty far for someone who was only 2-3 years in. And I started featuring and I started closing out stuff and kind of headlining and then going to festivals. And I was basically working myself to the bone because for some reason I felt like I had something to prove, especially as a woman. I felt like if I'm not at least twice as good as all of the men, then I'm not worthy. And so that was my comedy career, right? Like moving to Denver, coming here, going on tour. That was my mindset, was I have to do more than everyone else so that I can be considered great. In 2023, I'd moved to Denver and I had gone on tour with Morgan J. I opened for him in like 17 cities across the nation. And that was a really cool experience. I met him when I was in Florida. I opened for him while I was in Florida. And then randomly we were at the same festival in like Houston. And I just point blank said to him, "Look, I do really well with your audiences. I think that your audiences like me. I'd love to open for you if you need an opener." And he was like, "Yeah, sure." And I went on tour with him. And it was one of the coolest experiences of my life. And it was also probably one of the worst times in my life, to be completely honest, because I go on this tour. I'm 3 years into comedy at this point, which is kind of unheard of for someone to only be 3 years into comedy and to be like doing the amount of shit I was, considering that I wasn't like a Nepo baby or like came from a comedy family or was like already famous, like I was a nobody just kind of getting into comedy. And, we were like going from an airplane to a hotel to a club to another club. What is that Lady Gaga thing? She's like club, another club, no sleep. Like every week was just different cities, flying, driving, like getting to the place right before the show and then having like long days of just doing nothing and waiting for the show at the end of the night. And it was really fun. And then it kind of wasn't. Towards the end of the tour, it went from late September to early to middle November. And I wasn't like gone the whole time. It was like I'd be gone for like a week, and then I'd come home for a week, and then I'd be gone for 2 weeks, and then I'd be home for a few days. Like it was kind of all over the place. And in between that, I was also doing comedy festivals like an insane person. So I was like going to Rhode Island, and then I was like flying back to Oklahoma, and then I was going to Florida, and then I was in California. And towards the end there, I just was really miserable. And I was very deep in my eating disorder. I was very deep in my behaviors. I was having a lot of like personal issues while on the road. And so I was engaging in eating disorder behaviors. And that meant just like getting high in my hotel room alone and like binge eating or not talking to anyone, or just like spending days in my hotel room alone until the show and just not taking care of myself because I was just unhappy in life. And I think the tour was really cool, but I also knew that it was going to come to an end. And that kind of freaked me out because I felt like I hadn't established myself as a comedian in the Denver scene yet. And here I was just like already touring, and I wanted people to know who I was. A lot of overthinking was going on. And so I came home from tour, and I was like really sick and like physically ill, and was also just like in my eating disorder. And that was when I was talking to my therapist, and she legitimately was just like, so what are you going to do about your eating disorder? And I started crying because I was like, fuck, she's right. And I knew that I needed to do something, but like the thought of recovery was so scary because I didn't want to have to go back to a nutritionist. I didn't want to go back in a program. Like it all just felt so triggering to me. But I was also like fucking like miserable in my body. I felt like shit. I was not taking care of myself. And by now I think it was like around Thanksgiving time. And so the rest of the year was going to be like the holidays, and, you know, people were going to be doing their own thing. And so I kind of was just like, yeah, I guess I gotta do this. And I started recovery the week after Thanksgiving. And for me, what that really meant was like seeing my therapist once a week and then seeing my nutritionist once a week. And that was kind of it. I wasn't in an EIOP program. I wasn't in like an inpatient setting. I was like stable enough that I could be trusted to like go home and like work on a worksheet and like fill out a meal plan table thing. And so that's what I did. And it was really shocking and weird because the first time I ever went to recovery when I was 17, I was at like a center. I was like at the eating recovery center where they like taught you how to cook, and you had to eat in front of professionals, and they had to watch you eat, and they would tell you how much to eat or how little to eat. And like, it was so different. So this time it's like, okay, now how old was I? 27. And I'm going to actually like do this, and I'm actually going to try. So I came home from tour, started recovery, went through the holidays. In the beginning of 2024 in January, I thought, okay, I spent the last month and a half doing recovery. I can just kind of ease back into doing comedy, you know, balls to the wall like I always have. And I had all these dates scheduled in January and February, and I didn't want to like cancel them. Like I had all these dates in like South Dakota and Atlanta and like different festivals. And so I thought that I could just go straight from being off of comedy for a month into, okay, now I'm going to be doing it every weekend, flying every weekend, doing it every night again type of thing. And guess what? That sucked. Couldn't do it. And I kind of hit like another rock bottom in like March of 2024. I remember I went to Philadelphia and I was like miserable, and I was like really struggling with my eating disorder, and it was so fucking cold there. And I was actually opening again for Morgan, and the shows with Morgan were fun, but then I tried to put on my own show. I rented out my own little like, it was like a black box theater. It sat like maybe 50 people. And I had an email list at the time. I was like, okay, I have enough fans in Philadelphia. I think I could like put on my own headlining show. So I tried to do it, and it did not work out the way I thought it would. It was 25 people max, which is good, but it was still like half of those people didn't know who I was. They were like there with a friend who knew who I was. And I had a bunch of these like local Philadelphia comedians open for me who were all like super nice, but I could tell that they kind of had like not the best time at the show because the audience was just super weird. And then I felt bad because I put on this show and like I did a 45-minute headlining set and I felt like it wasn't that good. And I don't know, I just had like a really shitty time. I just was not excited to be there. I was not excited to be doing comedy. All of the people after the show, I remember like we let the doors out and I was standing by the door like selling stickers, and a good 70% of the people just walked right by me and didn't say anything while I was like, thank you for coming, have a good night. And so that was a really tough feeling to know that I like put on this show and all these people either didn't enjoy it and didn't want to talk to me or didn't even just want to like look my way and smile. That was like a huge bummer. So I came home from Philadelphia and I was just like in such a bad headspace. And I decided to cancel all of my shows for April of 2024 for that next month because I was like, I need to just chill. Like comedy's not fun anymore. If I keep doing it, I'm just going to ruin it for myself. And I also like don't want to be the type of comedian that when I go on stage, you can tell I'm unhappy because that's not fun to watch. No one wants to watch a comedian not have fun on stage. And so I canceled all my shows and I kind of like just didn't do comedy for like 5 weeks, and it was really calming. And I spent a lot of time painting and I spent a lot of time like crafting, and I really, really just wanted to, I guess, kind of like get back in touch with like who I was. I didn't know who I was. I was seriously like considering at the time, like, am I even a comedian? Like, what am I even really doing? And then I spent the summer kind of like going in and out of comedy. Like I did shows and I stopped like applying to festivals and I stopped applying to like really big auditions. My manager actually like ended up parting ways with me, which was like kind of, it was fine. I got a manager in like October of 2023 while I was on tour. And then by March or April, he had asked me like, hey, what are your goals? And I was very honest. And I was like, my goals are to like write a book. I want to like do public speaking. I want to talk about my eating disorder. I want to use my comedy to like spread awareness. And, you know, he's a manager. Like he manages like really big famous comedians who are like on late night and like have big specials and do tours. And so my, I guess, trajectory wasn't really his wheelhouse. And so, you know, he was just point blank, like, I don't think a professional relationship is beneficial for either of us right now, and kind of dropped me. But even though it sucked, I kind of knew it was like for the best because he really wanted me to submit to late night. He really wanted me to audition for JFL. He really wanted me to like go that route. And I think that was the beginning of the time when I realized I don't want to go that route, because that is the traditional comedy route, right? Like you start doing comedy, you get booked locally. Hopefully you get, you know, you become a regular at like your local club or your local, like whatever place is near you. And then from there, you kind of like build up, like you meet other comedians, they take you on tour, you go on tour, you submit to festivals. Then from there, you kind of start submitting to other stuff. Hopefully you do get a manager. You try to go for JFL. And there's just like a very clear ladder for stand-ups. And a lot of people don't take that ladder anymore, which I think is super cool. And I was kind of one of those people where I was just like, I don't really want to do that. So anyway, this is around the time that I'm like, I want to start a podcast. I want to do something. I used to have a podcast called Let's Fight About It. It was comedy focused. It was really fun, but it was really hard to wrangle comedians to schedule them all together. And I kind of wanted something that like meant more. I wanted to post something. I wanted to have a show that wasn't just about comedic value. I wanted it to have a message or have some kind of like positive energy to it. And it took a while for me to kind of realize that I wanted to talk about basically like my recovery and my body positive outlook and things, because I didn't know if people were going to like it. I really didn't know if people were going to like it. And I still don't know if people like it. And Jeff Ross had gave me the name My Body, My Jokes years ago when I had met him, and he knew that I did a bunch of jokes about my body. And he was like, oh, if you ever have a special or anything, like you should call it that. And so I was just like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to start a podcast and I'm going to call it My Body, My Jokes. And it just happened. And obviously had a lot of amazing help from Dude IDK Studios, had a lot of like moments of like researching, trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to have a producer? Is this going to be like a segment podcast? I mean, the first episode, I think I like read a bunch of stuff out loud that I had gotten from my Instagram. I used to do what's in my DMs. Like it was a completely different show, but I wanted to start it, and did a few episodes. You know, you kind of like compile them before you release them. And this is the part where I think things start to go downhill, or not even downhill, but things start to change. So it's very important to note that while I have done comedy up to this point, so this point being like April of last year of 2024, I was very lucky in that I got to build an online audience because I posted a lot of content. I was always filming my sets. I was always posting my sets. I was always online posting my shit because I used to work in social media management. So I knew how to do it. And I gained a pretty large following for someone who was only, 3 years into comedy. So I had a lot of followers, and I knew that 95% of them were men. And those were the stats I was getting from Facebook, from Instagram, from YouTube, from TikTok. Like no matter what platform it was, for some reason, men gravitated more towards my content than women online, which seemed odd because I felt like in person at comedy shows, when I did my jokes about my mom or my body or, I don't know, being curvy, I always felt like the women were the ones that came up to me and were like, oh my God, you were so funny. Like even my boyfriend loved you, haha, or whatever. Or like a guy would be like, my girlfriend thought you were great. Like I always felt like in person I connected with women, but for some reason online it was men. And so when this podcast came out, I posted, it came along with like a slight rebrand. It was like, hey, here's my podcast. And also I'm not Morgan Gallo comedy anymore. I'm Morgan Lorraine Gallo. I'm not just a comedian anymore. I'm an eating disorder recovery advocate. I'm not just like a clown on the internet. I'm also like a really intelligent person. And so all of this kind of happens at once because I love a good piece of drama. Okay. And so I switch everything. I switch all my handles, everything, whatever. I post it. If you don't know, the cover art of this podcast is me holding a sign, and the logo of the podcast says My Body, My Jokes on the sign. Behind the sign, it looks like I am naked because all you see is the tops of my shoulders and then from like mid-thigh down, right? Obviously, I'm wearing clothes behind the fucking sign, but like it's a really good idea for a cover art, right? Because it's like, yeah, it's My Body, My Jokes, and it almost looks like I'm naked. So I post that on Facebook, and I checked it this morning because I forgot it had over 100 comments from men on this Facebook post saying horrible shit and saying things that made me feel so terrible about myself. This was the day I dropped the podcast, okay? There were men commenting like things insinuating that they had just like came in their lap when they saw this. There were several men telling me to remove the sign. They want to see what's under it. When I kind of like shot back at them and was like, oh, look, another man sexualizing me in my comment section. It's just another day. I was attacked by this one guy who went on and on about how I'm a fucking hypocrite because I have an OnlyFans and I should shut the fuck up and I should be happy that he's even paying attention to me. I forgot how bad these were because I blocked this out of my mind, but I looked at them this morning specifically for this episode. And I blocked all of those people, but the comments are still there. And it felt fucking horrible. It felt so horrible to know that all I was trying to do was like announce a really exciting podcast that I'm working on, and it immediately becomes about my body. Shocker. It immediately becomes about my body, the way I look, men wanting to have sex with me. Like I don't even have a second to breathe before the men swarm in and start commenting on my body. And so that weekend that I think I released the pod on like a Wednesday, that the next few days I had to delete Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and YouTube like off of my phone for I think like 2 full days, because I was just so upset. I was so disappointed, and I was so upset because I felt like, yeah, I knew I had a lot of male followers, but I didn't know that they were going to be like that fucking horrible about it. And especially because like, you know, they act like they're my fans and they act like they want to support me. But then as soon as I come out with like a new project and it's like about my mental health, they're like, oh, ew. I got a lot of comments on that same post, or actually on the Instagram post, saying things like, this is cringe. Definitely should just stick to the dick jokes. I remember that was a big one. I remember some guy said something about like, nothing better than a female comedian that complains, or like something along the lines of that. And there were even a few male comedians in the comment sections defending me, and then they were getting shit on by the men because the men were calling them like cucks or whatever. Like they were saying like my friends who were defending me, who happened to be men, were now getting attacked by these same men saying like, oh, you just like suck her tit, you just like. And so I was really bummed. The first, I'll also be honest, the first day that I recorded this podcast, I hated how it looked, and I hated how I looked, and I hated how I sounded. And I went home and I binged that night because I was like really upset. So the beginning of this podcast was a very difficult time. It wasn't received very well by my audience. But here's the thing. As time went on, I kept losing those followers. And as more content came out, as more of the episodes came out, as I had more consistency with it, more guests, and it was very clear that like I was now not just going to post comedy. I was going to post this, my eating disorder stuff. I was going to post photos and talk about recovery. I was going to talk about body positivity. People started kind of unfollowing me in droves. And it was really upsetting at first. It was very upsetting at first because I thought that everything I had worked towards was crumbling, until I realized that the people who are unfollowing me were never really true fans of me anyway, right? Because if they were really fans, then they would see what I was doing and they think it was cool. I think the toughest part for me through all of that was just feeling like I didn't really know if I had the support of my fellow comedians. I've always really cared what a lot of other comedians have thought about me. And I mean like local comedians. Like when I was in Florida, it was the Florida comedians. When I'm in Denver, it's the Denver. I don't mean like famous people. Like people who I see and work with on like a daily or like weekly basis. And I was always just kind of like hoping that what I was doing wasn't cringy. I was just really worried. I'm like, do people think that what I'm doing is weird? Like, do people not want to work with me because now I'm talking about my mental health? And so it was really difficult last summer to understand like how I actually felt about everything. And now that it's been some time, and now that I've had time to kind of think about it, I realize that I'm much happier doing what I'm doing now than what I was doing last year, because I still do comedy and I still perform and I still write. But I do it for me and I do it for my audience. And like with the Roast of Diet Culture show, with like my Hourglass social shows, hopefully have like more shows coming up like with Sapphic Collective and stuff. Like that's who I want to perform comedy for, because those are the people that relate to what I'm saying. And I'm okay with that. Like I don't need to be big and famous. I don't need to have a huge audience. I just need to know that there's these like 30 people that want to listen to what I have to say and feel it on a deep, deep, deep level. So overall, I think I've lost over like 25,000 followers on Instagram and Facebook, and on YouTube I lose subscribers every single day. I get a lot of really nasty comments on YouTube about what I'm doing is cringe and how it's inaccurate and all these things. And still when I post comedy videos, for some reason they get like overtaken by men, which whatever. Like, I don't, at this point, I'm kind of like, if you like my comedy and you want to follow me, that's great. I just hope that you don't turn it into like something gross, because I'm tired of feeling like my existence on the internet is for other people's pleasure. And that's a very difficult thing to say as someone who runs an OnlyFans, because that has been a very tough peak to summit with the people who tell me like I can't complain about being sexualized when I'm doing it to myself. But here's the argument I'm going to make about OnlyFans. OnlyFans is a platform where I am actively giving consent for my photos and videos to be consumed in whatever way the consumer wants to consume them, so long as they pay the fee for them, right? So if you subscribe to me and you pay for a photo or a video or whatever, you have my consent to do with that what you will. Do I want to know what you're doing? Not really. Do I want to see what you're doing? Absolutely not. But you can do it, right? It's a consent. I am giving you my consent as an adult woman. When I am on Instagram, when I'm on Facebook, when I'm on Threads, when I'm on YouTube, and you're commenting about my body in a sexual way, you're telling me what you want to do to me, you're talking about your private parts in my comment section, that is a non-consensual encounter. That is something that you are forcing upon me without my consent on my platform, right? And I know that a lot of women know this. So for those of you listening, I'm sorry if this is like a repeat lesson, but it's like you would never go up to a stripper at a coffee shop when she's off of her job and ask her for a lap dance, would you? That would be fucking weird. So because I have an OnlyFans, that doesn't mean that you get to treat me however you want on other platforms. And I think unfortunately, like there's just, men aren't going to learn that. There's a lot of dudes who don't give a fuck. They think that as long as you have an OnlyFans, you're a slut, you're a whore, I can call you whatever I want, I can do whatever I want, and you get blocked immediately. But I don't think that there's an argument to be made about like, because I have an OnlyFans, I shouldn't demand respect. I think that's bullshit. I think that that's a really unfeminist and unmodern way to think about things. And I'm going to keep doing it because I'm young and I'm hot and I can. And like, why the fuck would I not? You know what I mean? I have enough male followers. Like, I might as well take advantage of it. But I did want to make that point because that's something that I've gotten a lot recently, where I am very vocal about how frustrating it is that men have like non-consensual conversations with me in my comment sections on platforms like Instagram and Facebook. And they think that it's okay because I have an OnlyFans, but it's like, no. This is not onlyfans.com, sir. This is facebook.com. My mom is on here. What the fuck are you doing? Anyway, that's my little rant about that. But so let's fast forward for a second. Right now, I'm, recording this episode. I have some shows scheduled. I have some things scheduled. I have some auditions coming up. I'm dancing a lot. I have a big burlesque show I'm dancing in July. Where am I at with comedy? Well, that's a good question. I had a very eye-opening conversation with my psychiatrist last year about why does comedy just have to be stand-up? And I was having this whole conversation with her because I was so incredibly stressed out about the amount of stand-up I was doing, feeling like I wasn't doing enough, but also being stressed about the fact that, well, I don't really want to do any more. And it's not because I don't like stand-up. It's because I don't like doing stand-up for audiences that don't get what I have to say. And even though it feels shitty to say that, because as a comedian, you should be able to make anyone laugh, I've been universally funny for enough years. I'm tired of catering to every audience. It's time for me to find my own audience. And she basically just said to me, like, why can't you be a comedian who like hosts a podcast? Why can't you be a comedian who like writes a funny blog? Why can't you be a comedian who acts? Why can't you be a funny dancer? And it really opened my eyes to like, oh, I don't have to put this label on myself because everyone else has. I don't have to force myself to do stand up and post my dates and be super show-offy with it like I have in the past just because I've been labeled as such. Like, people evolve. Like, people do other things. I literally am going through recovery. So of course my life is going to change. My habits are going to change. What I like to do is going to change. Why did I have to keep like chasing the ladder? You know, why did I have to keep looking up at the ladder of JFL and Netflix and, you know, all these like festivals and all these big breaks? And why did I have to do that? Because that's not really what I wanted to do. I wanted maybe like the accolades that came with that. But what I genuinely wanted to do was just perform. I never really considered that at that point. I never really thought about it that way. And that was a very eye-opening conversation. And so that was probably in like September, October of last year. And I started to really try to focus more on like recovery, crafting. I taught myself how to sew a little bit. And just really like getting back into who I am and still doing comedy and still doing local shows, but like not putting this pressure on myself to chase this big comedy dream because it's okay if it doesn't happen. Like, as long as I get to perform for like women, people in recovery, queer people, like who get what I have to say, that's what I care about. I don't care if I can sell out the Paramount Theater in 10 years. Like, I don't need to do that because I know that what I'm doing here is enough. And that's kind of where I'm at now. I mean, I do the podcast every week. I dance every week. I'm really excited to like kind of go after new ventures and roles. I've been like auditioning and sending in self-tapes a lot, which is exciting. I host my Hourglass social show here at Dude IDK. I'm hopefully going to be working with Sapphic Collective. They just took over Mercury Cafe. The gay club, the Pearl Divers, took over Mercury Cafe here in Denver, and now it's called the Pearl. And they're really interested in doing Sapphic comedy shows, and I really want to be a part of that. So right now my goals are less about, you know, putting together an hour of stand-up and filming it and putting out a big special, and more like, how can I, you know, land an acting role? You know, how can I like do more dancing? How can, like, I want to be this show coming up in July, I'm really excited about. I want to do more public speaking. How can I start to get in front of like schools and talk about eating disorder recovery and use my humor to kind of boost me up as like, not only am I funny, but I also have all this incredibly important shit to say. And continuing to like work on my recovery, because it's hard. There's ups and downs. I feel like I'm in a slump right now. I feel like I'm struggling more now than I have in a while. And that kind of sucks. But it's just like part of it. It's just sometimes things in life happen that cause emotional distress. And then you're like, oh, I have an eating disorder to lean on. And then you have to remember, no, I can't lean on the eating disorder because I'm in recovery. So I just wanted to do an episode where I talked about that, because I think I've gotten a lot of comments recently made to me about how I'm not a comedian anymore. And it bothers me because I think it's incredibly unfair to like categorize someone as such just because they're not doing their career the way that you think they should. And being a comedian is so much more than just like doing stand up every single day and like wearing yourself out, going from club to club to club and hoping that a club passes you or whatever the fuck. Like, it's about like how you approach life, how you approach work. Like, so I just wanted to do an episode where I talked about that, coupled with how this podcast has been received, because now I get a lot of compliments on the podcast from women at dance, from queer women, from people I randomly meet at stand-up shows that are like, oh, oh my God, like you're the host of the pod. And that makes me feel so good. It makes me feel so good because it means that I'm doing something and I'm putting something out there that at least has somewhat of an effect on someone. And that's all that I care about. As long as there's someone that's being helped out there, that's getting the courage to fight back on their eating disorder, to talk to their parents, to seek help, whatever it is, like that's all I care about. And then today, let's end with a little affirmation from a fortune cookie that I have. Finding out who you are is a worthy pursuit. Thanks, Panda Express. Have a good day. Thank you so much for listening to My Body, My Jokes. Please be advised that the information provided in this podcast is for general discussion purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. Always, always, always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare professional with any concerns you might have regarding the topics discussed in today's episode. Also, if you or someone you know is struggling with an eating disorder, please call the National Eating Disorders Association helpline at 1-800-931-2237. Bye.